the dark night of the soul and the perception of the world around you. I would say it's one of the biggest challenges of the dark night of the soul. Because when you go through that experience, it's very likely, it's actually certain that how you perceive the so-called outside world will change, either completely or drastically or significantly. Because when we go through a fundamental existential crisis, part of it is realizing that actually what you used to believe in may not make much sense. And when I'm talking about the world outside, basically it may have to do with many different areas or aspects of your life. So for example, world events, the corporate environment, if you've been part of it, maybe your family, your friends, your circles, your social circles, and so on. And I would say that for me, one of the most painful moments were those moments when I realized that something that I believed in, some belief systems that I acquired when I was younger, didn't make too much sense. In fact, I started to discover that so many of them were just wrong, and the world suddenly seemed to be upside down in a way. Probably many of you know what I mean. And I would say that I felt betrayed because I realized that I was taught or I was programmed to believe in some things, and I thought it was right because, like everybody believes in that, right? Everybody does the same thing, and there are so many people who do that, so that must be normal, that must be right. And then when it began to dawn on me that some of those things simply didn't make sense, and I could give you a number of examples, but maybe I could do that in another episode. But when I realized that, it was very painful. And, on some level, I felt stupid. But on the other hand, it didn't make sense because, how could I be stupid if, when I was younger, I came from this point of an innocent child who just trusted the world around me, who trusted, like my parents, my teachers, and also those people like my parents and teachers trusted somebody else. They trusted, for example, like the government authorities and so on. So basically, they didn't seem to have too many reasons to doubt that. And the dark night of the soul has highlighted that for me, and I must say it was very painful, especially when I started exploring many different topics. For example, world politics. I had never been interested in that, but after 2020 and then after 2022. I just began to ask many questions. And I thought it was actually good that some world events took place, because otherwise probably I wouldn't have asked those questions, and probably you know what I mean. And when I started asking those questions and I started digging, I had this period, in my life for a couple of months when I was, going down that rabbit hole, and it was crazy. I was also, into the so-called conspiracy theories, if you will. But at some point I was into that, and then I chilled. But there is a grain of truth in everything. And when I realized that basically the world doesn't work the way I thought it did, it made me pretty sad. And then when I realized that the people who you should supposed to trust, they may not have your best interest in mind, and it was so painful. So coming to terms with that, I would say was a big part of that crisis, and also redefining my attitude towards that, because at the end of the day, it is what it is. And now I believe that it's part of this game that we're playing, because we live in the world of duality. So basically, you just need a contrast. You need black and white. You need good or bad just to cope in this reality. So this is how it operates. And it doesn't mean that I condone things that are, well, let's say bad, because that's not about it. But I would say that these days I have much more acceptance towards the current state of affairs, and I believe that this might be a constructive way of going about it, because if you know that it is what it is, and now what are we going to do about it? And I also think that awareness is the starting point, but basically it's not the topic of this episode. But what I'm trying to say, when you realize that the world around you, the world outside, may not operate the way you thought you did, it may come as a shock, really, and it can take you by surprise even. And I think that at some point you may experience some sort of reality, insanity in your mind. I think it's very possible that you may go through that, because especially if you take in a lot of information, and that's something that I don't recommend, because there's just so much. But yes, if those facts just arrive in your perception, in your reality, you're like, oh my God, it's shocking. And you still don't know what might be true, what may not be true. So I remember one of a very shocking event for me was when I found out that actually an actor, a Hollywood actor that I used to adore, he was just like my favorite actor, very talented, like one of the top actors, the nice guy, so to speak, like in Hollywood, but also very well, super talented. He was in many beautiful films, amazing films that people love. And then I just came across this information that he may have been involved in very, very bad stuff, so to speak, like disgusting stuff. And when a friend of mine told me, because she showed me some articles and some materials on the platform Rumble, I was like, no, not him. I'm 100% sure that no, it's impossible. And I said no, well, many times. And she was like, I don't know really. But the thing is, I've come across this information in many different sources, and I just wanted to share it with you. So that's what she said. She was well-meaning basically, and I don't think that she knew that I liked that actor so much. But basically, for me, it was also shocking, because I didn't even see that coming, because for me, films and music, this is also something emotional. So when you think about it, like when I was a child and I was listening to some artists, and when I was watching films, it became part of my identity. So I really, really felt betrayed. I felt hurt, and I just didn't see it coming that I would feel that way, because, well, it's just an actor, right? But for me, it didn't feel like that, and it took me by surprise, to be honest, because I would have never thought that it was a thing like that would touch me and would be shocking for me. But I was like, no, it's impossible. And at some point, like I did some research, and I don't know whether it happened or not, but I would say that there's quite a lot of evidence. And at this point, I'm like, yeah, it's probable that that person was involved in this and that. And actually, I stopped watching films with him. Maybe I've seen a couple since that time, but it's just changed my perspective. And it was part of this, like cognitive dissonance. So I'm telling you about it, because these are I would say very simple things on some level, because sometimes we think like, oh, when you're going through the dark night of the soul, there are those big spiritual concepts, but sometimes it's just like it's about very basic parts of our reality. Basic, it's not like they're not important, but well, you may think that it's, so personal and just part of your little world, but obviously some things are very important in your little world. Little from the perspective of, the world, the big world outside. But, I wouldn't. I wouldn't overlook it in a way, I think that it deserves attention. And when pain comes up, I also think it deserves attention, acknowledging it and letting it go. Because if something was important for us, and I do believe that films and music, it can really touch our soul. It's not anything stupid, really. I would say it's something serious. If it touches your soul and then you realize that, oh, but there is some dark stuff going on, perhaps. Yeah, I would say it can be very, very shocking. So, yes, when it comes to the perception of the world outside, it may be pretty challenging. But if I was to share any tips, I don't know if I would have any, but I would say it's very important to be detached from this, because it's very easy to go down that rabbit hole, and especially when you start watching many different films, and then you can become addicted to that. So I would be careful about that, because it may be depressing. And yes, other than that, I also do believe that it's important to stay detached as much as possible and focus on your well-being, and just don't overload yourself with negative information, and especially from weird sources, because sometimes people just create materials to like attract clicks, and basically they use the mechanism of fear to attract those clicks, which I don't think is very ethical, but this is how the world operates, because like fear sells still, unfortunately. And I believe that the dark night of the soul and the collective dark night of the soul is here to fix that aspect as well, because we don't need more fear. So if you're feeling tempted to watch too much, just don't. Yeah, so I think this is everything that I wanted to say. Feel free to share your experiences or your viewpoint on this. And I think this is it. I wish you all the best, and until next time.